strategic necessity. It is indispensable to restoring trust, legitimacy, and confidence in the international order itself. Kenya, therefore, remains steadfast in its support for the common African position as articulated in the Ezulwini Consensus and the SIPTE Declaration, which calls for Africa to be accorded permanent representation on the Security Council with all the prerogatives and privileges of permanent membership, alongside additional non-permanent seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa does not need privilege, but fairness. We don't need exclusion, but inclusion. We do not seek confrontation, but partnership anchored on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and of course, shared progress. This summit, therefore, presents us with an opportunity to define a new era of engagement between Africa and its partners, an era based not on dependency, but on dignity, not on extraction, but on value creation, and not on short-term transactions, but on long-term shared prosperity. Because the Africa we envision is an Africa of confidence, an Africa of ideas, an Africa of innovation, an Africa of enterprise, an Africa that believes in itself, invests in its people, mobilizes its own resources, and engages the world as an equal partner in shaping balanced, prosperous, and peaceful global future. Africa is rising, determined to shape its own destiny, and increasingly prepared to shape the future of the world itself. That is the Africa Forward agenda. An agenda grounded not on dependency, but in sovereignty. Not in vulnerability, but in resilience. And not in limitation, but in possibility. That is the Africa whose time has come. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya is deeply honored to co-host this summit here in Nairobi. We look forward to productive deliberations, practical outcomes, and enduring partnerships capable of advancing prosperity, stability, dignity, and shared progress for our people and for future generations. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the warm welcome and for reinforcing Africa's economic position today and the importance of partnerships such as the Africa-France partnership. Asante sana, Your Excellency. And now it's my profound honor to welcome to the stage our next speaker, who is also our co-convener. He's a global leader who has consistently championed international cooperation and a world of rules-based order, has been at the forefront of advancing dialogue on global economic reform and strategic partnerships between Africa and France. Please welcome to the stage His Excellency, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of the Republic of France. Bienvenue, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much. Mr. President, dear William, Your Majesty, Head of States and Governments, Secretary General of Permanent Commission of the African Union, Secretary General of Francophonie, ministers, ambassadors, entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen, Asante sana, Mr. President. And I will switch in French, if you allow me. Le président a tout dit. Et donc, je vais juste rajouter quelques convictions pour qu'ensuite on puisse passer à nos travaux. C'est un nouveau type de sommet, c'est une nouvelle philosophie, et donc nous allons aller au bout de cette philosophie. D'abord, ce sommet a commencé par des rencontres de la jeunesse, des entreprises, de la culture, du sport. Et d'ailleurs, nous allons juste après...
with the captains of industry with whom we'll be able to discuss things. But deep down, the conviction that I wanted to share with you is that the agenda that Africa and France need to have, the one that I stand for, must not look backwards, but just look straight ahead. As President Ruto just said, we need to keep our eyes ahead. And what I have been trying to do for 10 years now is to construct a relationship which looks backwards with lucidity, and we've been working with Cameroon, Rwanda, Algeria, and several other nations, and with which looks with bravery at the present, looking at our necessity of culture, activity, looking at co-development and co-investment, and which is built on respect for the fact that Africa has its own agenda. The relations between Africa and France, as we see it, as the way we want to implement, are built on courage, respect, and a will to have a shared agenda. That's what we've been working on for 10 years. We spoke about it yesterday, so I won't go into it now. Why am I so convinced that this is the right way 10 years down the track? Because the challenges of Africa and Europe are shared challenges. We all want peace, prosperity, sovereignty. Europe has always been fighting for this, and after the Second World War, the EU was built on this struggle for peace and sovereignty, and now the European agenda is indeed one built on strategic autonomy so as not to depend on American or Chinese power, and when we want to defend the rule of law, international law. We believe in equality, in equal footing trade relations. We defend the climate. That is what Europe is all about. And that is the exact same challenge that Africa has before it. What Africa wants is peace, prosperity, and independence. And deep down, this partnership that is embodied here in this Africa Forward Summit is a bond between Africa and Europe. This is what France is working for: peace, prosperity, and this strategic independence. It's a very powerful thing, and if we can do this, then it will enable us to reconstruct together a multilateral order that has been thrown into upheaval, been jeopardized, affects all of us, and deep down this can be a strong basis for moving forward together. And in terms of peace, I don't want to repeat what President Ruto said. Peace is going to require African unity, and I really firmly believe this. And I'm delighted to see so many of my brothers here, heads of state and government from so many nations who have come to Nairobi. I know that you're all very busy, so I'm very grateful to you for making this, because it really does share this image of a united continent, from Maghreb right down to the Indian Ocean, the south of the continent, Western Africa, Central Africa, and Eastern Africa. Remember, all of these different parts of Africa, given that it is so large, are all part, nonetheless, of one continent with a shared agenda. Which means that if we want to be beside you, it means that we have equal representation, better representation for Africa in international instances such as the UN, the financial institutions, and we want it represented in the Security Council of the UN. As we have also been fighting for Africa to have a permanent seat at the G20. We've been fighting for this for years, and we've now made it a reality. And we are fighting for an agenda, along with the Secretary General. We've been talking about this for an African UN presence, which will be all the better placed to defend its own peace and security operations, particularly through the UN missions, we hope to see all the wherewithal given to Africa to ensure its own sovereign security. The African continent needs better representation, and Africa has the capacity to build on its strengths. So what we stand ready to do is assist you financing that with a reworked security arrangement which is respectful of the sovereignty of each African country, but never eclipsing each nation's sovereignty. And I'm delighted to hear from your introductory remarks a moment ago that we can build together a shared agenda to overcome the peace and security challenges that we face and continue to work together so that the whole of the UN can move forward on a more equitable basis. Prosperity next. With President Ruto, I was discussing this. I think that he is absolutely right when he's talking about the prosperity of the continent. It's clear, it's simple. Now, what I'm offering is not to offer assistance. Those days are behind us. And we know that there are budgetary challenges in some instances, security challenges in others. These are realities that we need to be realistic about, but we need to rethink our North-South relations. And we need to look with lucidity at all of the cross-cutting benefits that Africa can derive from its diaspora. Those who are working very, very hard in many, many of our countries and send remittances back home are another important lever that we must not overlook. But the main notion I want to focus on is co-investment. What is co-investment able to achieve? It means investing in human capital, the young talents in Africa, in a formal economy. One of the major difficulties here is too much of the African economies that are underneath the tip of the iceberg as informal economy. It's about time we brought them into the value chains and to structure your agricultural sector and your industrial sector in such a way that it will be stronger than ever, so that Africa will no longer be seen as a place for rare earths and other resources to be extracted, but rather to be a partner. So we are working towards a transformation of investment relations, investing in value chains, energy, sustainable development, building on your strengths and your youth and your talent. And this is what the Business Roundtable is hopefully going to enable us to structure by looking at investing in AI, health, the blue economy, and sustainable agriculture. So what we need to do is look at the partnership that we want together through a logic of investment. And this is where we see this agenda of prosperity and sovereignty altogether. Getting Africa forward on the economic level means greater sovereignty and autonomy. It's important for Europeans as well to have more strategic autonomy in its partnerships. We need to ensure that we do not become dependent on the two major powers who in some ways look like they're going to eclipse everything. And it's not just France and Europe today who are going to mobilize all of the critical minerals or rare earths that we're going to need for the future. It's neither France nor Europe that will be here giving you diktats on the way forward. No. Those days are way behind us. No, the European agenda has every interest in seeing you march strongly towards a sovereignty and autonomy because they're the same goals that we have. And if you are successful in this hunt for sovereignty, be it with agriculture, with economy, or wherever, then you are also offering more solutions to us. So your success is our success. So when you invest in your populations and have them succeed, that means fewer people fleeing poverty. And so this again is our success and your success hand in hand. So here what I want is for all of us to take a leap together. This is not an agenda which is univocal, which is top-down from Europe to Africa. No way. It is an equal footing partnership built on mutual respect. And we're going to build this together with respect, lucidity, and courage. And that is why, if we're going to be successful in this, we need business leaders, and that's what we announced yesterday. And this is a big first, 23 billion euros of investment in the private sector. These are for industry, for firms in the fully private sector companies in Africa. These 23 billion euros of investment is 14 billion for French firms in Africa, 9 billion in investments for African businesses on our continent. On your continent. And so this, we're hoping, will be the jolt that we need to inject more momentum into the process. All of this is going to, as President Ruto said, be based on quite simple things. A new partnership, a new vision for managing resources, for sustainable agriculture, for having tax and financial policies that are more consistent. It's also going to mean that we can mobilize international funding better, be it the World Bank, be it with the IMF and with other international, with special drawing rights, with all kinds of mechanisms and debt restructuring that can move us all forward. So it's a true strategy for guaranteeing peace, and that is why the ITD here in Nairobi is so important. We're going to be able to work with you, with the ATD, so as to move forward, so that ATD can play its full role continent-wide, and in this way prove successful. This strategy is a whole new paradigm shift, and it's going to require a new financial paradigm shift. And this is all part of our shared strategy. Other than that, I would say President Ruto said what I wanted to say, that I think this summit embodies our new partnership, and I think he said it better than I ever could. So I want to endorse what he said. In a moment's time, we will be meeting with business leaders, and we'll be discussing growth. We'll be discussing finance and investments, and then after that, we're going to have the outcome of this Africa Forward Summit with the declarations of those investments. And then together with President Ruto, we're going to bring to the G7 in Evian, on behalf of all of you, the message from this forum. And then throughout the year, at the IMF, World Bank, at the UN, we are going to showcase and push this shared agenda. And that is why this summit, in my opinion, is going to enable us to jointly set forward our upcoming path. So I don't want to take up any more of your time, dear ladies and gentlemen, but I just wanted to extend my thanks to President Ruto for agreeing to host this outstanding summit here in Nairobi. And I'm delighted to be here with you, with my brothers and sisters from all around Africa. And I'm looking forward to working on all of the input that we can pool, your strengths, your energy, so that we have a new African-French partnership. This agenda for peace and prosperity is something that I truly aspire to. And it's something that, with a lot of respect and humility, that I want to put at the service of this continent, the world's youngest continent. And even last year, we had the strongest rate of growth from around the world. So it's not only the continent of the future, it's already a power and a strength in the world today. And I am proud to be standing at your side and to try humbly to build with you this agenda in which we will be investing heavily. We want to work with you. Long live friendship between Africa and France. Thank you.
A warm, big round of applause for His Excellency. Thank you, Mr. President, for reinforcing the shared opportunities between Africa and France to continue working together. And now I'd like to please welcome on stage one of the world's foremost champions of multilateralism, peace and security, sustainable development, and global solidarity. Please welcome to the stage His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Welcome, Your Excellency.
President William Ruto, President Emmanuel Macron, congratulations. Congratulations for convening this Africa Forward Summit, and congratulations for forging this renewed partnership between France and Africa for African development. Your Majesty, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the name of this summit captures the moment and the mission. Africa forward. Forward through one of the most turbulent global moments in living memory. Africa is not waiting. Africa is moving, and Africa is leading. African continents are driving one of the defining debates of our time on how to reform a global financial architecture designed in 1945 for a world that no longer exists. Africa played a leading role in the approval of the Pact of the Future by the General Assembly of the United Nations. It is African leadership building new tools like the Borrowers Platform, and so that the countries can speak as one and negotiate from strengths. Challenging the credit rating systems that locks too many of the borrowing tools they need. Africa has had a leadership in securing the Seville commitment to expand the lending power of multilateral development banks, to mobilize private capital at scale, and to deliver relief from the debt burden crushing developing economies. It is African leadership through the African Development Bank that is advancing a bold vision to reform the continental's financial architecture from within, mobilizing African resources for African priorities and prosperity. Africa is driving a UN framework convention on international tax cooperation so that countries are no longer cheated out of what is what is rightfully theirs. And I want to praise the African leaders that have understood that it's absolutely essential also to do everything with the adequate policies and strategies to mobilize a much stronger share of national resources in order to be able to accelerate the development of the continent. And it is African leadership, alongside the small island states and other developing countries on the front lines, that has placed the climate emergency where it belongs, at the center of the global agenda. This is not a continent waiting for solutions, this is a continent producing them. But let us be honest about what stands in Africa's way. A global system designed without Africa and still largely operating without Africa, perpetuating century-old injustices. A continent of more than 1.5 billion people with no permanent seats on the UN Security Council, as was referred by President William Ruto. Without the voice, the representation, and decision-making power it deserves inside the international financial institutions that shape this economy, it's not Africa that loses, it's the world that loses the fact that the voice of Africa is not conveniently taken into account. Meanwhile, as we all know, official development assistance is collapsing. Aid budgets cut, partnerships unwound, commitments walked back just as the need is greatest. So this is not only a financial crisis, this is a crisis of solidarity. Take climate change. Africa did not cause it, yet the continent is warming faster than the global average, bearing the harshest consequences in displaced communities, lost harvests, and economic shocks. Today's global energy turmoil, volatile fossil fuel markets, fragmented trade, is deepening fiscal stress, inflation, and stunted development across the continent. Africa must be at the center of climate justice. The continent holds 60% of the world's best solar potential and receives 2% of global clean energy investments. With the right finance, Africa could generate 10 times more electricity that it needs by 2040 entirely from renewables. Yet, 600 million Africans still live without electricity. And 1 billion still rely on unclean cooking, a crisis that takes 800,000 lives a year, mostly women and children, mostly out of sight. And on average, the continent faces borrowing costs twice as high as OECD countries as an average, draining resources that should be building the future. That is not a market verdict on Africa. It is a verdict on the injustices of the system. The continent also holds extraordinary reserves of the critical minerals the green transition depends on. For too long, the pattern has been the same. Africa's resources have been extracted, the value captured elsewhere, the environmental damage left behind. The United Nations panel on critical energy transitions minerals points the way. Fair value chains, in-country processing and manufacturing, transparency, environmental and human rights standards, and meaningful benefits for affected communities. No more exploitation, no more plundering. The people of Africa must benefit first and most from the resources of Africa. And going back to climate change, adaptation must no longer be an afterthought. The adaptation finance gap must be closed. Africa is paying an enormous price in relation to the devastation caused by climate change, and Africa has been denied the resources and the capacities able to protect their populations and their infrastructure in these circumstances. Climate finance with justice is a must in today's world. Excellences,
Excellencies, this summit is about a new partnership which has been reinvented. Partnership on an equal footing, based on complementarity and mutual benefits. This means that we must co-invest in industries that have been created by Africans. Strengthening universities and African research institutions, developing African capacities in artificial intelligence so that AI can be shaped by African data, African languages, African researchers, and African leadership. Building partnerships which are built on the roadmaps of Africa, the free trade areas in Africa, the Agenda 2063, and the national development priorities. And this means funding African priorities with fair conditions for all, with capital capital that is accessible. The biggest transformation of this century is a market but a generation. And by 2050, 1 out of 4 people on the planet will be African.
Jana katika
do rosto da nueva alianza.
في كل مكان في هذه القارة الذين
cultivating and they are asking for inclusive democratic governance and responsible institutions. Dear friends, the continent is not just an African challenge. When Africa succeeds, the entire world wins. Systems and partnerships built on mutual respect. Together, let us move forward with Africa, with trust, solidarity, and the hope of a shared future. Thank you very much.
Another big round of applause for His Excellency. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to welcome our next speaker, who is a distinguished African diplomat, currently leading Africa's premier continental institution. He's a steadfast champion of continental integration and multilateral cooperation. Please welcome the African Union Commission.
Monsieur William Ruto, président de la République du Kenya. Excellence, Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, président de la République française, co-initiateur du sommet Africa Forward. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Excellences, Monsieur le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Mesdames et Messieurs. D'emblée, j'aimerais adresser nos remerciements au Kenya pour l'accueil de cet important événement. À travers cette rencontre, le Kenya et la France souhaitent impulser à l'Afrique une dynamique de progrès. En effet, l'Afrique doit se positionner pour peser sur les décisions globales. La géopolitique internationale est perturbée. L'économie mondiale vacille. Le multilatéralisme et la sécurité collective sont remises en question. Dans ce contexte incertain, notre continent se doit d'être aux avant-postes de l'alternance. Il est indéniable que l'Afrique possède des atouts majeurs: démographie et jeunesse, terres et ressources minières, énergie renouvelable et hydrocarbures. En effet, transformer le continent résidentiel
the transformation of these assets into advantages, diversifying our economy. This is part of the recipe for success. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is possible to welcome technology at a lower cost to train young people and our women. Energy will be the major factor. The competitiveness of our economy will require affordable capital. It is estimated that $690 billion with 80 billion of illicit financial flows and 115 billion in annual additional costs.
Parfaitement ces défis. Les solutions viendront de la cohérence de nos politiques, de l'engagement sans réserve de nos États membres et de la stabilité à travers le continent. Les institutions multilatérales sont appelées à être proactives.
More balanced partnerships and the cost of development are fundamental principles of global governance. Africa stands ready to take on greater responsibility on the international stage and in particular in the global south. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace and stability are an important challenge on the continent. Security must no longer be an obstacle to investment on our continent. It is therefore imperative to ensure that we do this without hesitation. The African Union Commission has made this an absolute priority.
It has become irrelevant when I listened to our presidents here, in particular President Ruto. He touched upon all the issues I wanted to raise, but let me conclude my very brief remark by saying this. The future is for the African continent. The African continent will be the powerhouse of global growth. So let us work together, let us put our energies together and move forward. And I thank you.
Your Excellencies, please allow me to briefly highlight the high-level roundtable discussions that will continue throughout the day. Immediately following the opening session, we'll proceed to the high-level plenary on energy transition and green industrialization in the adjacent room, Savo B, it's just right next. This will be followed by a high-level working lunch session on the reform of the international financial architecture, Savo C. Following the lunch working session will be a plenary on peace and security. Thereafter, we will then transition into parallel roundtable discussions on artificial intelligence and digital technologies, blue economy, health, and agriculture. In parallel, there will also be a special session on Congo Basin Climate Commission ahead of the closing ceremony. To ensure the smooth flow of the summit proceedings, members of the organizing team will be available throughout the venue to provide guidance. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our open plenary speakers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless Kenya. God bless Africa. God bless France. Asanteni sana. Allow me to hand over to Mr. Mike Gitonga.
Thank you, Vivian. Let's give a clap for Vivian for great moderation. Your Excellencies, that brings us to the end of this session and would like to now invite all the presidents and heads of state to a family photo, which we are going to take right here on stage. So I'll kindly request that all the Excellencies for a family photo before we exit. All presidents and heads of state to kindly just be here on stage for a family photo.